and the freshwater river of the Liesbeek and the Black River, generally teeming with life, and having this vantage point of a raised flat hill, not very high, is a wonderful asset of an acropolis, but not removed. It's connected to that life and the continuity of the rivers into an estuary, which has another form because it's slightly salty, and then the sea. All makes this a wonderful, sustainable place to live. And besides that, the context in the broader area of the mountains to the east, with the rising sun and the rising stars, moon, and to the west that we see more clear later. I believe that besides the scientific aspects of this place, there are the heritage aspects and the centuries of meaning to First Nations people, and also for tourism and for cultural connections to this place, which will be opened up hopefully. So there were very few trees when this place was originally set up. It would have been more indigenous planting, so trees are kind of planted because people like trees, but they're not part of the indigenous setting. And I also like trees, so I hope they won't remove them. But I do think that suitable thinning in places to have access to views from strategic spots would help to enhance the place. And so we can see across, basically north is there, the Prasa, the confluence is towards the north slightly, with the Black River and the Liesbeek River coming around to that confluence. So the confluence spot was moved because Prasa, at that time Transnet, encroached on the land, moved the river, and then later we got this flood canal built in 1956, although Heritage Specialist says 1952, I disagree. And certainly it was never intended to be a replacement for the original Liesbeek. It was intended as a flood canal. The important thing is to see the mountain orientated towards the west. And obviously Devil's Peak is powerful in its closeness, but then we've also got a Lion's Head, which is clearly noticeable. We should go a little bit further forward, but the most important thing here I want to point out is that this river clubhouse, which has been taken over by Liesbeek Leisure Pty Limited in 1989 as an offer to rent and develop. This is a 2-story plus height building. Okay, it's got a gable, so it makes it almost 3 stories. In the background we can see a 7 or 8 story office block, which the city said these office blocks in that office park, which was called the Black River Office Park, because this park was going to be called the Black River Urban Park. Now we've got the Black River Office Park next to the Liesbeek River. We like to confuse ourselves. But yeah, 8-story building. You can see the top of the gable is kind of almost in line with the top of that building, right? If it was here, it would be much, much higher, blocking the mountain. At the moment, everything is kind of in harmony, even though that building is really gross in its intrusion on the silhouette line of the mountain. And he was the one who told de Almeida where to find this water source, and that there's plentiful resources here, fresh water and cattle and all that sort of thing. So it was de Almeida who landed in that spot, got his water, wanted cattle, wasn't successful in negotiating it because the local people for some reason didn't want little trinkets, and then the deal went sour. Maybe they ran off with the trinkets and didn't give the cattle, but they came and attacked. So The place that they attacked is clearly described as 1 league or 6 kilometers from the watering source, and if you measure it out, it comes to here. I would say to Falkenberg. Okay? And the theory I have is that they would have come up that side along the river after crossing at this crossing point, coming up there, hugging the mountain without being noticed, rather than walking exposed along the path where there may be guards, and then entering the camp, which is described in places as circles of houses in kraals with the animals inside, and they went, stole the cattle, captured some kids who were looking after them or whatever, and got surprised and escaped back. And the escape route is described as a narrow, dusty path. And the only narrow, dusty path would have been this essential path, which is above the wetland, and it crosses at that time, 1st of March 1510, would have been summer, dry, okay, and the Koena people would have chased them down, climbed onto the cattle, run them down, and they, something like 80, or I don't know the exact number, were killed on the way as they were caught up and through the sandy dunes, and Almeida escaped with all his armor and whatever on the way to Salt River and was killed there somewhere. We're here. When they came back from their winter sortie, they came back and settled here, and there were these guys, and they were saying, "Hi, nice to meet you. Come, let me give you some tobacco. Let me give you some trinkets." And they say, "What are you doing here?" And they say, "Oh, we're going to just settle here and be friends and help you with things. We'll give you some food." There was a sort of attempt at a friendliness, and may have been genuine. They wanted to be at home. They couldn't go back to Europe. But clearly, when they started ploughing up this sacred land, the local people freaked, because this is the survival. There's only a limited amount of green, fresh food for their cattle, their precious children, that's made them survive off the milk and gave them their transport. It's power, but we have got a voice, and we need to use that voice together with all the other civic. And we're facing, instead of an updated policy that says we can't do anything about this, we're not going to come and turn this into a pristine place because we don't have the funds for that, but we're going to start with this. We're going to make a beautiful area over here as a sacred place for people to gather and enjoy and to learn about the history. So there's a site over here which can attract the public to watch the birds, to appreciate the place, and to imagine that over years it will transform. As vision that this proposes, that we are here. So this is where that clubhouse is.
Yes, sir.
We are here. This is the main building behind me. So, here, these are the trees we're seeing that are blocking our view. But that's kept open, okay? And these are small buildings, 2-story, 3, and this is 4. So that's part of the big building on the existing clubhouse on the existing footprint, okay? And this is kept open here as urban agriculture and a green learning center as part of the vision, keeping this central access route with a circle here on the axis of the existing architecture. So a little bit of additional buildings to replace what was tennis courts and things like that, to add some accommodation for the conference center that would make this place be alive as an educational center, cultural center, while this is retained. Thought and discussion has gone into saying, wow, this is worth saving. Okay. Don't let somebody come in and say, I like this place, I think I'm going to turn it into a hotel. Sol Kersner buys it up. Okay. No, it's got a huge heritage and history
Yeah.
that is priceless. Okay? How do you tell the story? Why is it that people come to Cape Town and all they see is white people in Victorian houses? They don't see Africa. Okay? This is early Africa in the Cape. It's got other stuff in, attractive stuff with meaning, but it must be part of an African landscape. It's a Koena first settlement here.
So you can have side by side this kind of cutting edge science, in astronomy, and pre-colonial histories and colonial frontier histories.
Absolutely.
So it becomes a
And they want to get this UNESCO recognition of this place as a World Heritage Site by saying, it's a national heritage site because of its science and because of the quality of the environment, which has grown over time with people who care for that. Okay? As an authentic place with, it's got that unity, or whatever the right word is, the integrity. But it also has that history, pre-colonial history, as Slankop, as a site of the first scientists who lived by the stars and the planetary movements. That was their guiding clock and their sense of being. So it being like a royal kraal with those leaders who inspired the people who lived nearby and came through here on their way to the conference for the great events, the wedding or the hearing of or the burial of the previous leader, down at the conference where they'd walk down the route we went, or the attack of De Almeida coming up the side, getting into the kraal and then escaping round along that path that cuts across and back to the ships. That's part of the structure of the place, historic age.
So you're looking for the traces of that past in the current landscape.
It's part of it. It's part
so
of
it requires interpretation,
Correct.
understanding how the landscape has changed, but still trying to reconstruct
it's
the
enough
earlier.
to get your imagination alive, to believe it, to see it, and to hear the story as part of that reality.
Regardless of everything else, this process has sort of given momentum to participatory processes in planning. Not everything is going to be agreed upon. We don't know what will be accepted in the end, but there's been a process where civil society organizations, the Ob Civic in particular, has had quite a significant hearing. Is that quite new? Or?
Well, let's look at what the process is. The process comes from city planners who are saying we are heading towards a new dispensation, and there's a good sign that things are going to change in a new democratic order. Let's look at what we see as being the future of our integrating of Cape Town. Okay? And one of the areas that needs to be looked at is this, what was called the Black River Urban Park. Okay? And then they started doing a range of work and research, and they also looked at the heritage and environmental whatever, and they came up with a proposal which was then put to an open forum at the River Club in 1998. And after 5 years of consultations on it with a whole lot of input, it eventually got to a final draft which was adopted by the city in August 2003. Okay? So that has heritage planning and guidelines and environmental issues and a management plan all thrown in, plus the formation of the Two Rivers Urban Park Association and its constitution to be a ongoing body representing all stakeholders inside and outside of the park. Okay? And it went on. We dealt with different issues as they arose, and in 2012 you get the district plan, which looks at the entire Table Bay district, and it affirms the principles in that 2003 it summarizes this as a natural destination and recognizes its value along with Signal Hill and Table Mountain